Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Michelle Hopping. I'm the director of the MBA Career Management Office. It is great to see so many familiar faces. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's MBA Career Management speaker event on personal branding. Our guest today is branding and crisis management expert Judy Smith, whose groundbreaking career served as the inspiration for Shonda Rhimes' hit TV show Scandal, which revolved around the life of a professional fixer. Any Scandal fans in the room? All right, love it.
We got a lot of gladiators, that's still good.
Ms. Smith's unique combination of communication skills, media savvy, and legal and political acumen has led her to build a multi-million-dollar firm advising and counseling some of the world's highest profile individuals and Fortune 500 companies on an array of personal, corporate, investor, and public relations matters. She has honed her skills through the experience with some of the most historic and sensational events of our time and has been featured in numerous national publications for her work. Her portfolio and success serve as a blueprint to building a personal brand that truly leaves its mark. And moderating today's fireside chat is Wharton professor Americus Reed, who is the marketing department's only identity theorist. His research focuses on the role consumers' self-concepts play in guiding buying decisions and how social identity, social influence, values, attitudes, and judgments interact in shaping consumer behavior. So please join me in welcoming Judy Smith and Professor Americus Reed.
Excellent. Awesome. I am super excited.
So am I.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome you to the Wharton School.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
These are our colleagues. These are the future captains and captainesses of industry. We are super inspired and excited to have you here so that you can give us some of your wisdom.
Oh.
But I want to start with something sort of basic.
Okay.
Okay. So when I think about, I hear this word called fixer. Okay.
Oh,
So when I think about the word fixer, I think about there's a fantastic movie, a Tarantino movie called Pulp Fiction.
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
And there's a character in there named Winston the Wolf, and played by Harvey Keitel. And he's asked, "What do you do?"
Mm-hmm.
And he leans over and he says, "I solve problems."
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the idea of like something goes wrong out there, whether it be with your product, your service, etc., somebody's going to get the call.
Yes.
And they're going to step in and have some kind of plan for you, right? So am I catching this correct? Like this is the world, the crazy, chaotic world of crisis management.
Yeah, I would say probably that would be accurate. It's very interesting because if it's a field that you choose, it really is 24/7. I mean, there's no, it's. The crisis occurs at the most sort of crazy times, right? So I think 2 days ago, what day are we now? I had a CEO call because he walked into a boardroom and was going to get fired. I had a human resource person call from a Fortune 500 company because they were about to be sued, she thought, for a class action lawsuit. I had a entertainment person call because they misspoke on social media and was getting I can say crap, right? Getting the crap beat out of them. Yes. What else happened that day? Oh, and I had another client call because an interview that we gave strict talking points for veered a little off to the right. Yes. And had to navigate that. And honestly, that was all before I had my lunch at 1 o'clock. So it's not for the faint of heart, right? You really have to want to do it.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah.
I want you to tell us, how do you define crisis?
Well, I think a lot of times when people feel like they're in it, they overreact sometimes, and it's really not a crisis. For me, a crisis is, in particular if it involves a company, we're chatting a little bit about this, but does it go to your core brand? Right? Because everything doesn't need to respond to, and particularly because of social media, because sometimes when you actually respond to it, right, it just gets the problem or crisis bigger. So usually my advice sometimes is just step away from the Twitter, step back, step away from social media, and I guarantee you there'll be something else that's going to come up. Now for me, for example, if someone said, that Judy Smith is a liar, or I did something horrible to a client, or something that to me goes to how I define my core brand, then I'm going to respond to it.
Gotcha.
Right? But if it's something just sort of somebody's opinion and just bothers us and we don't like it,
That's different.
right, I'm not going to respond to that.
What's interesting about crisis, Judy, is that I was looking this up, and I was looking at the Chinese symbol for crisis, and it turns out that I don't speak Chinese, but I was told that it turns out that it's made up of two characters. One stands for danger, and the other stands for opportunity. And the idea being that if you, and I think,
to steal that. That's good. That's good stuff. Yes.
that if you respond to, it's not so much
Yes.
necessarily, you tell me if this is correct, it's not so much necessarily, if a crisis occurs as much as how do you respond to it as an opportunity to come out stronger, better, et cetera.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, look, I will say this. I was talking about this yesterday to a reporter. There's some crises that I think that you just don't recover from, right? People always talk about rehabilitation, right? That's not possible. But I do think that if there is a crisis or a problem, or if there's a misstep, right, that it is an opportunity because you learn from it. Whether you are a regular person like us or a CEO, there is some lesson in that, right? And it can be seen as an opportunity. Like, for example, somebody asked me last week, I was speaking, and they said, well, why did you represent X company? We'll just say it was Coca-Cola, because they were sued for discrimination, right? I'm like, of course I'm going to represent them because they got sued for discrimination. Why? Because you can get in there and you have an opportunity to make real change, right? I can't make it standing from the sidelines yelling that's a bad thing. We all know that's a bad thing, right? But being in a position where you are there that you can make lasting change is a good thing. It's a good thing.
Excellent. How did you get interested in this field? I mean, it's a massive area. How did you get your start?
Well, this is going to sound dumb. I don't know if this is where you're going, but how many people have you guys heard this from when people say, find your passion? Anybody tell you guys that? So that literally drives me insane. And the reason why it drives me crazy is because, like, how do you do that, right? People say, give you motivational answers. You'll know it when you see it. Do you know what I mean? You have to try several things. You got to look for it, pay attention. I'm seeing people nodding, so I have to put on my glasses. But so for me, it's just sort of a quick story, and so you will understand this. So I have a good friend. Her name is Michelle, and I've known Michelle since I was...
Obama?
No, not since I was 4. Right,
Okay.
right. I've known her since I was 4, but...
There you go.
So my Michelle, I've known her since I was 4 years old, and I call her Beanhead, and she calls me Pocahontas, right? So well-kept secret, because 4-year-old, you know somebody that long, they can call you that.
Yeah.
And so she called me a while back, and she said, you want to go out for a glass of wine, and then just to make me laugh, she said, we'll throw in some popcorn when we go to the restaurant or something, right? And so I said, I can't do it because I'm doing this book, and they're making me write how I got started in crisis. And I was like, well, heck, I don't remember that. I mean, what am I going to do? I don't want to make anything up. I don't remember. So she said, well, look, if that's all standing in front of us and a glass of wine, I can easily tell you that. And I said, well, what? I mean, like, when? She said, so 7 years old, it was this big fight in the alley, a dodgeball, right? And I wasn't even in the fight. She said I was peering through the window, right? And immediately when people started fighting, I came up and said, okay, everybody, let's talk about it.
That's great.
Let's break it up.
You're like, I'm going to issue a statement now. What
Right, exactly right. And then she told me, which I remembered this, there was a playground. I grew up in a poor neighborhood, and so it was a playground up the street from where I lived that we used to go after school, right? They had programs and that kind of stuff. And so we came up to the playground one day, and they said, well, you know, you guys won't be able to come up for another, like, 3 weeks because it's going to shut down. I'm like, well, why is the playground going to shut down? And they said, well, it's because we don't have any money, right? And we're like, well, where are the money people? We need to tell them we need money. And so they said that we're downtown, right? And so immediately, you know, we had a little neighborhood caucus, all, you know, I was about like 12, 13. And so I got everybody in the neighborhood to save their lunch money. Like, it was like quarter, 50 cents, whatever it was. And we took the lunch money and went to go to the store to get money to make signs, right? So we could say, you know, go down. So we snuck on the bus, which we were not supposed to be on at 11 o'clock, and we went downtown and we found the money people, which was really City Hall, right? And so literally we were all in a circle. The little security guard got us in a circle, and, you know, we're all scrawny to, we need money for our playground, help us, we need money for our playground. And so a camera crew came over there, and Michelle said, I don't know who it was, pushed you up, and I said, we need money for our playground. We need the money people to help us. If not, we're going to be bad people, and we could get into trouble. And it's crazy, right? And so she told me, I tell you this story to really sort of make you think, because she said that that was really what you were meant to be. Like, you didn't really have a choice in that, right? It had to be something that related to helping people or problem solving. So when you think about when people give you that thing about find your passion, right? Really think about what you feel in here and match that up, because if you're not leading with here, what you really do is not going to be fulfilling. And it's going to take you a while. I have two grown kids. Well, let me take that back.
Age
Still
versus
payroll issues, yeah. So on the parents' payroll. So I misspoke there. But I remember, you know, my sons had to go through really like 2 or 3 jobs before they said, okay, this feels good. Let me, you know, try to stick with this. So it just, whatever it is, it just takes time.
Gotcha. And so I think your point is also there's a kind of deeper thing inside. Sort of like chase your passion is a cliche.
Yeah.
What you're saying is like there is something that will find you, and it will almost be like an inner voice that will speak to you and say, hey, this is kind of where you need to go. It just feels right for you.
It does. It does. And when I think about it, it makes logical sense, because when I first started my business, probably like most folks, right, I was doing everything because I was trying to keep the lights on. So somebody would call and say, hey, can you do a big ad campaign? I'm like, yes, I can do an ad campaign. Can you print brochures? Oh, yeah, we're good at that too. Yeah. And really, when things honestly started to shift is when I started to focus on what I was good at, right? And not trying to do, things that you know that you're not good at, and things that didn't give me something back. Does that make sense?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And those two things should be correlated, right? Those things that you find that are feeding the soul.
Yes,
right?
yes, no, absolutely. Because really, for me, as corny as this is going to sound, at the end of the day, the reason why I do it is twofold. Is one, because I like helping people. And it doesn't matter if you are a CEO running a corporation or an individual, it's all the same, you're a person, right? Work at the White House taught me that. And so I like helping folks, and I also like getting people and companies on another path, right? Because you get to do that. You get to make some change, and that's a good thing.
So that's really interesting, the fact that there
Now,
is
people don't look at it like that, but that's what it is for me.
Yeah, because kind of the superficial analysis is like, okay, Judy's job is to keep people out of the news.
Yeah.
And you're saying like there's something deeper there. There's a change agency there that you're drawn to.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, honestly, about social media, right? It's hard to keep people out of the news.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it's totally changed. You can, bad news travels probably internationally about 19 seconds, right? So even if in our business, there used to be this old sort of thing, you need to get out in front of it. I don't know how you get out in front of 19 seconds. Right? In particular, if you are a corporation and you're trying to figure out a statement, you got to talk to legal, you got to talk to PR, you got to talk to maybe communications, to human resources, right? So it's hard to do that because the landscape has changed so much, I think.
I want you to build on that point, though, Judy, because I think it's to me it's fascinating the dynamic that might be happening when crisis occurs inside the organization. Because let's take, for example, the situation Starbucks here. In Philadelphia, right? So, I mean, the CEO is not even awake yet, and a video is going around the world. Is your point, right? At light speed. And it's like so the need to respond, I think, is perhaps felt to be amplified by those C-suite folks. Right?
And I'm going to tell you something too. Anytime that there is a video, you're in bad shape. You are in bad shape, right? For several reasons, because it really is the way that the majority of people get their news, right? Like, I remember, you guys, do you remember this? It was United, we were talking about United or American, United Airlines. Remember that guy that was all bloodied up? How many remember that? Bloodied up, they dragged him up. See, exactly. So if any of y'all get in trouble in a video, just remember this. So speaking of videos, because I know we're going to get to you guys' own brand, but I want to mention it. So I've gone through this with clients, as well. You guys really want to be careful as you are going out into the job market about what your own social media looks like. I cannot tell you how critical that is. A client's son went to Harvard undergrad and Harvard business. Top of the class, right? Any job person wanted, and took a look at social media and didn't get the job. And it was totally based on that, right? So social media was full of, and also too, when people say that your social media is private, really honestly, there's nothing private, everybody. There's just not, right? If you called me tomorrow and I didn't know it was you, if I wanted to know who was calling, I could call somebody in 2 seconds and find out your phone number, your address, your social security number, right? Everything. So he didn't get the job because the social media was partying, lots of poses with various, beer, liquor. I mean, a lot of that, girls, young girls that, what do I want to say? Didn't have appropriate clothing on, all of that. And so they looked at it and said, so if that's your outer-facing presence, that's not going to work for us.
Not going to take a chance on that.
No, and more companies, I know for us, when we are talking about hiring, we have really an extensive interview process, but you can't even get to that Because
Failed the
even
social
prior
media
to that,
test.
oh yeah, I mean, prior to that, we do, a check, like, okay, who is coming in to interview? I need to know that,
That's
right?
correct,
Or
yeah.
do I want to interview them based on what's out there? So I would just say, as you are talking about and thinking about building your own brand and your identity, that is part of that.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yes, we at the Wharton School, we spend most of our time rigorously studying. We don't do that.
No,
partying
of
stuff.
course not. There's no time for any social activity.
Yeah.
No.
Mostly just Bible study.
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking too as well.
No,
Yep.
it's
As a matter of fact, the person who greeted me had a Bible in their
There you
hand.
go.
I was
There you go.
shocked.
No, I tell students all the time in my class. We do have a very robust social life here.
Yeah.
And I
You
tell the
do?
students every
What
time.
y'all do?
Every time I talk to the students that they're about
Oh,
to
see,
go
they
off,
said they can't tell me.
We're
right.
sworn to secrecy. Every single time I try to give that same advice. Like, listen,
Yes.
you're going out to beach week or the white party or fill in the blank, whatever it is, and it's
Yeah.
like, please don't end up on YouTube.
Yes. Oh, exactly. And it doesn't go away.
That's the thing.
Right. It doesn't go away. It's not as if you can try to call that back.
Yes.
Right.
Right. You can't
and say,
untweet it.
No,
it's
you
out
can't.
there. Someone screenshotted it. And saved
Exactly
it.
right.
Yeah.
Oh my God. There's so many people that think that they can delete text, right, from whatever little apps they are. And we were in a case, and I said, "Where'd you get these?" Oh no, I screenshotted them. I saved them all before they were deleted. Great.
All right.
So a lot, yeah. Just a sense of awareness, I think, is important.
Do you find that because a lot of these colleagues here are going to be, aiming for the C-suite
Yeah.
and building their brands. Would you agree with the statement that today there's a new skill set that has to be associated with being in the C-suite, and that is you have to be camera ready. In other words, something goes down, NBC is outside the door. Somebody just got pulled off your plane and beaten up. What do you have to say? It's like you have to have a different skill set now to be able to get out there
Yes.
and present your narrative to protect the brand. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think the C-suite is definitely changing. We just this is maybe 2 months ago, got asked by the CEO to, there were 5 people in that suite, right? And so 2 of them, the CEO thought needed to be up a level, right? And it was in the area of being able to, I call it, you have to be able to lead and handle issues during peacetime and wartime, right? So his version of that employee was that person was good, at peacetime, not wartime, right? So when something happens. The other thing that I would say is that when you, I should say, make it to that C-suite, people are really looking for leadership, right? It sounds very basic, but what usually happens is people try so hard, like all my life I'm gonna be in the C-suite, and it's like core group, the CEO and 5 of us. And because you work so hard to get there, right, you try to protect that position. This is exactly what happens. And so then you don't give straightforward, honest advice, right? Because you're trying to jockey, right? You're trying to do the political thing. And really, for me anyway, it's not workable. I think one of the things that has helped me is the ability to give straightforward, honest advice, whether people want to hear it or not, because that's what I'm hired to do. Now, sometimes people listen, sometimes they don't. But I think that's important, because if not, you become a part of a corporate culture where it's just sort of, group speak, basically. And it's part of, when you talk about brand identity, it's part of the reason why people call us, because they know that that's what they're going to get, right? And, sort of, as we're thinking back, I'm going to the Beanhead and Pocahontas days, is that really where that came from was that sense of fearlessness in terms of I don't have anything to lose, right? And so, you know, my parents always said that it doesn't matter, and I didn't know this at the time when she gave me this example, whether you're working for the President of the United States or you are talking to, you know, John who delivers your, you know, who picks up your trash 2 days a week, that you speak to everybody with decency and respect and you treat everybody the same. So if I'm talking to the president, I'm going to say, like, dude, that is not going to work. Nobody's going to buy that policy, and here are the reasons why. And most people don't take that approach. They sort of talk around it. But for me, it has been one of those tools that have served me well.
Interesting. So more of a radical candor you bring, if you will, to, I got to just tell you the way it's going to go down.
Yeah, exactly. I think people appreciate that because really, I think people hear a lot of BS a lot of the time, right? And it's just not what I'm serving up. When I worked for the president, I didn't know this then. I didn't know it until maybe after 4 or 5 years, and I was talking to him after he had left the White House. And I started getting all of these calls when he was leaving from like CEOs of, I don't know, you know, Coke, like 5 or 6 CEOs called me up and said, you know, hey, we want you to come work with us, you have a job here, et cetera, et cetera. And I never knew where it came from, right? And so I was talking to the president and we call it his paper man, which is, you know, track of all phone calls and that kind of stuff. And I said, this like weird thing, I said, why did you do that? Do you know what I mean? And because I found out from his paper person that he made those phone calls, hence why all the CEOs were calling me personally. And he said that he made calls for 3 people in the entire White House. And I said, well, why'd you make a call for me? He said, because you never lied to me. You always told me the truth, right? And you were there with me, right? Just right up to the end. Interesting. And when I thought about that, I was like, yeah, that was right. I mean, you know, we've had some serious, you know, conversations back and forth about things, but yeah, that was a helpful moment for me. Yeah.
You're just making me nostalgic. Truth in the White House.
Yeah, I know, right? I know.
I'm tearing up over
yes,
here.
I know. I feel your pain. I feel your pain, right?
Yeah. I think it's interesting, though, because, and I want you to speak on this, because I think there's a lot of dynamics that's going on, and you've been in that room.
Yeah.
One can imagine, like, the brand people, you know, a crisis happens, and they're saying, we should take the product off the shelf. Right. One could imagine another contingency or a group of folk in the room who's legal and says, well, if you take the product off the shelf, here's your loss of sales. Here's $1.
Right,
you know,
exactly.
a dollar amount. And then they look at the brand people and say, what have you got? And the brand people are like, well, your brand's going to get hurt.
Yes.
So it's a little softer, kind of more qualitative. So how do you sort of navigate that sort of interesting sort of tension in the room that's going on to get to the right outcome?
Right. I mean, I like to hear everybody's opinion, right? Because we all should be valued. But at the end of the day, I have to give what I think is best, right? So usually when I'm given advice, I will say, this is what I think you should do, and here are the pros to it, and here are the cons to it. But this is why I think it's the right decision. And really, oftentimes when brands get in that situation, it's not hard. It really isn't. If you think of how consumers would feel or think about an issue, you know what the answer is. I mean, it's the reason why in our business, it's a very old case, but God, people still write about it, is Tylenol, right? When exercising caution, just take it all off the shelf, right? And wouldn't you want somebody to think about your safety of you and your children, and let's not, if there's any doubt about it, right? And so the easy part is not coming up with the advice. The hard part for people is making the right decision. Does that make sense?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Does the definition of right decision vary on a case-by-case basis, or is
Oh, it does.
It does? Okay.
It does,
Okay.
yeah. And look, people have to be, people have to be comfortable with it. To your point, I think with corporations, there's a whole host of things that one weighs, right? If you settle this big lawsuit, are you going to set precedents for, do you know what I mean, somebody else coming? I mean, there's so many things that you have to weigh and consider, but you got to come down on what you think is the best option, given the certain circumstances, and a lot of things weigh that, right? I mean, a lot of factors you have to take into account. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about, because these guys are going to be in the C-suite, and what I'm noticing is that because of the amplification of social media and crisis going around the world so quickly, and videos, like you said, that there is this, like a knee-jerk reaction to like jump out ahead and say, I'm sorry, before you have kind of the information.
Yes.
How do you figure out that balance? Like whether or not to come out and like jump out ahead versus taking perhaps a more restrained approach where you're perhaps go out and you start validating concerns first before, because in some senses it's like one would think that psychologically that could get you really far. If you just come out and say, hey, we don't know what happened yet, but we kind of feel your pain, we empathize with how you feel. We haven't said we've done anything yet.
Right, no, exactly.
But how do you, because this is the age of I'm sorry.
Yes.
Especially in kind of a politically correct, hypersensitive, kind of easily to offend everybody on the planet sort of.
I totally agree.
So
I totally agree.
How do you think through that?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's very interesting to your point because the culture and the landscape that we find ourselves in has changed tremendously, and will keep on changing. Anything that you say or do, I mean, you see this in everyday life. You said something to your friend and you didn't know, and that person got offended. You didn't mean to, but that person got offended, right? So you want to really weigh, to your point. First of all, do you think you did anything wrong? Right? That to me is number one, basically. If you didn't think you did anything wrong, did you think you really offended someone? Right? But to your point, I think you want to make an assessment first before you jump out there and apologize. Because here's the other thing we do know, that once you apologize, you're going to be in the same situation, right? Because some people are going to, accept your apology, some people are not, and then some people are going to say, well, I didn't like the apology. They're going to criticize the words that you use, and so oftentimes you kind of find yourself in a situation where, it's, let's not. So you got to weigh it. Depends on what the issue is, honestly. Yeah.
What do you think is how do you approach the decision calculus around how the media plays into this? Because I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my perception is like the media loves a story. And so if the media can have like, here's the hero, the hurt consumers, here's the villain, those evil corporations that are out to hurt us.
Right.
And that's the story. So.
Well, it's sexy.
Yeah.
I mean, really, good stories is just the true fact of it. Don't drive clicks. It does not. Does not. And so, that's why I was saying with video, and I was talking to oftentimes to some of our media counterparts that, that run websites. And, the headline often doesn't reflect the story. And nobody literally gets past the second paragraph. It just doesn't happen. And, I have learned a lot about it. I was talking to one of my friends who runs a news site, and, I saw him, I said, oh God, I said, you look as bad as me, you need to get some rest, tired. And so he's been getting up goes a bit early and gets up at 12:45 and starts to work on the site, because if they post things like at, 2 or 2:30, people are up. Apparently we all don't get enough sleep. So people are up, looking at the site. And then by the time that everybody gets up at 6, that's when the traction hits. So you have to be right there. So it is a science to all of this, really. Yeah.
And so talk a little bit about that, like the point of how apologies work. When do they don't work? What are some of the dynamics around, like if you're going to advise a CEO to get out there and make a statement that's going to involve an apology? What are some of the good apologies and awful apologies that you've experienced, and why?
Well, I think they have to be authentic, right? That would be one. Well, I think since we mentioned the video of the person getting beat up, bloodied, and dragged off, I think that apology wasn't great, right? If you have to see that video 5 or 6 times, which is, I think, something he said that he looked at it several times, and now he could see why it's bad. That's not good, because people's organic, right? When you immediately see it, that something, that something is wrong there, right? So I think it has to be authentic, and I think it has to resonate. It has to be believable. Like, I remember, you guys may have not seen this, but Lance Armstrong went on Oprah's show, right? And he, for years he went around saying, right, that he didn't, there's no doping involved, that sort of thing. And he went on her show to apologize, to let people know. And I remember we did a survey afterwards to see how many people believed the apology and how many didn't, and did it make you feel better about him? And the majority of people didn't believe it. That he was just, out there apologizing because either it was going to come out or somebody was going to, do you know what I mean, sue him. And so actually coming out when he was not ready to sort of own it, right, and apologize did not work in his favor.
Interesting. It also helps if you're not a narcissistic.
Well, then there's that. Yes, exactly right. Exactly right.
I only say that
we
because
were channeling.
Yeah.
We were channeling. Yes.
I was a huge Lance Armstrong fan.
Yeah.
I was out there defending, and
Right.
totally made a fool of when all of this hit.
Yeah,
And all of that.
I
And
got
the
you.
brand was his brand was totally
Yes.
destroyed.
Oh yeah. No.
His personal brand.
Totally agree.
Nike
totally
goes on.
agree. Yes. Well, one of the things that is a test in terms of how well you recover from a problem or a crisis is how close you are personally to that brand, right? So when your brand and your person is one, that makes it much more complicated, I think.
Now, this is a great segue because the
Yeah.
new book is coming out next year.
Yeah.
How to Bounce Back from a Personal Crisis.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, the thought process, the research, and some of the advice that you would share with
well,
our
it's
colleagues?
ongoing. It's ongoing. But what the purpose of the book is one of the things actually that the TV show taught me was that there were so many people that emailed in, text, called, everything, because we all sort of go through issues in our life, right? Whether it's work and relationships, all of that. And so it is, how do you navigate through those and how do you bounce back from that? And so just trying to provide people tips on that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And when does the book come out? Is it early next year?
Yes.
Excellent,
Fingers crossed.
excellent.
We'll see.
Yeah,
I need to put some more.
congratulations.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank you.
I'd like to switch now to, perhaps getting our colleagues involved and engaged in the discussion. So
Awesome.
if you have any questions for Judy, my colleague Sagitha has the mic.
All right, I'm going to get up and walk for questions. I have my Fitbit on, so I need
there
to
you go.
get.
It's telling you
It's all about me. I'm trying to get steps.
Okay, well, this is a short walk, Judy Smith.
Oh, heck.
I'm sorry.
I need some balcony people. I'm coming up there.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so when I think of personal brand, at present, the social component plays a big part.
Yeah.
Brett Kavanaugh's back in the news for things that he allegedly did during his college years. And so I think about, being at Wharton, there's a social component. I feel some restraint.
I was going to say, you trying to remember things that you've done in the past.
No. But I would love to know just how to approach that because, as Americus mentioned, these are potential C-suite leaders, politicians, et cetera. So how exactly do you build your personal brand on a social level in a space like this?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's difficult, but I think you really have to think about it, right? In terms of what do you want, information do you want to put out there? What do you want to post? What is that going to, what is that going to look like? Because to your point, you can't take it back, right? Like I personally, I don't do a whole lot of that, right? If I have something to say, I'll tweet it out. Even that's rare, basically. But I think you want to give some thought to what do you want that to look like? I mean, and do you need it based on what you're going to do? Like, I'll give you an example. I didn't know this person. I met him once, and I called to tell him this because it's this thing, because I've been doing it for so long, you can see it. So it was this colleague that was the number 2 person in this corporation, right? And I saw, here's one tip for you, and I saw him do a lot of interviews. And I called him up and I said, so just a little tip from where I'm sitting, right? I'm not up close, but I would stop doing so many interviews. And he said, why? I said, because you're doing more media than your boss. I said, so a tip is you probably don't want to do that. And so his answer to me was, thanks, Judy, I got it. We talked about it, et cetera, et cetera. Less than 4 months after that, got a call. Yeah, no, I'll be leaving. I've got, a deal where I'll be consulting and that kind of stuff. Totally that. So all of that stuff you just want to, you just want to weigh, basically. Maybe a good test would be if it's something your mother could see. Right? Is something that maybe oftentimes two things sometimes can be misinterpreted. Also, too, for the brand, like we had a situation where somebody had called us about, it was a artist, and somebody had pulled back, same thing, tweets and posts, right, from like 10 years ago and said they were sexist, racist, something like that. Anyway. Come to find out that we did a little research, and the person who tweeted was the first person to tweet that, these prior tweets were racist or bad, was hired by another company to do that because this person was an artist and they were about to put out some music or something so that their new music would not do well. Now, all crazy stuff, but just, that's another thing to be aware of. All right, balcony, somebody's got the I'm coming up. All right, oh, good. I got a pit stop here, yes.
Hi, Judy. Sounds like you have a very stressful and demanding job.
Lord, every day.
I'd like to ask how you manage stress, and also how do you set time for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question.
So really what I try to do, I was not great at this when I was in my 20s, I have to say. But what I try to do, and I do it every single day, I take at least 30 minutes for myself. And if it's not every day or every other day, I go for a walk. It's nice for me I wish I lived in a better climate, right, where it's actually warm all the time. But it's just something for me about just being outside and walking. And I will answer emergency phone calls walking to my destination, but I won't pick up the phone walking back. It's just, you got to have that sort of, private time, and I think that's important. Yeah.
I think it's interesting, though, Judy, because you had mentioned in a previous analysis that part of what you do in the moment of crisis, you're not talking about leaders that are doing their business. You're talking about panicked individuals who are trying to survive.
Yeah.
And so part of your job is to come in with the calm.
Exactly.
That sort of lowers the temperature and so you have to also, regulate that within your own.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we probably almost at the tail end of it have been dealing with this crisis, and the head of the company called me a few days ago and just said, I don't want anything. I just want to say thank you. He said, I always feel better when I talk to you. I don't really know why. And I said, if I told you, then you wouldn't hire me. But yes. So, yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that's right. Yeah. All right. Okay, what about this middle row? You guys think I'm coming back to you. Yes.
Can you please tell us about a time in which you were brought in to solve a problem, to handle a crisis, and you realized that they really just wanted you to soothe over what the external looked like and not actually fix the problem internally, and how you were able to deal with that dichotomy, or if there's a due diligence you do to opt out of those clients?
That's a good question, because I'm trying to think there. I don't know if it's just one. Here's what I would say, is that when I decide, this is the beautiful thing about having your own firm, you get to say no or yes. That's just the true fact of the matter. So if I feel that someone is trying to BS, right, and not speak the truth about something and not address it, like things don't go away, people think that they don't, I'm not the right person for them, right? I mean, there are, we fired clients. I'll just say it's not something I can help you with, right? And good luck. So yeah, and I think that's okay. What is good about it is the flexibility. I've talked to some of my colleagues that work in large firms, and they don't have that ability to do that, right? You know, they've taken the client's not listening, they're, you know, telling the client to do this, the client wants to do that, even though it's wrong, but they, you know, they still have to work on it. That's not me. I'm the wrong gal for that. Yeah. All right, yeah.
Thanks for presenting. Quick question on how you balance what the lawyers say and what you think is the right thing to do, and how you recommend clients balancing, you know, the legal liability versus the PR standpoint, or what you think should be changed in the organization.
You know what's really good about that? And I can't even say that question. I can't even say this was like a strategy or a plan, because I would be lying. I wasn't that smart. But what's so helpful is because I have a law degree. I used to be a prosecutor, right? And so how I got to law school was, someone told me I argued well, and so I should try law school. I thought that was a compliment. It was just because I was annoying, right? And so it's true. They told me that years later, like, you were just so annoying. And so I went to paralegal, and I said, I kind of dig this law thing, and that's what made me decide to go to law school. And so what's really helpful, right? And so when we have this sometimes conflict, right? Legal is saying, well, no, I don't think we can say that because, you know, it's going to lead to this. Well, no, I mean, I kind of read that same case law, and doesn't really say that, basically, because people are generally afraid of legal. So, but it really is a balance. It really honestly is, in particular when it's just, you know, massive possibilities of lawsuits and damage. But the thing that I always say, and lawyers hopefully are getting a lot better, is, you know, when something happened, lawyers would immediately say, oh, we got to say no comment, right? And first of all, when you say no comment, people believe that that's guilt anyway. And so I often say, like, I can think of 50 ways to say no comment without saying no comment. How many times sometimes have you read, I know I do, I read this and I say, oh God, that is so good. That person said absolutely nothing in those 3 sentences, right? Like, I appreciate that. I can appreciate that from where I sit. So there are a lot of ways to sort of work with legal on that. And don't give me no comment. Let me craft something, right, that you might be able to live with, if that makes sense. Yeah. All right, how we doing? Yeah.
Hi, thank you for being here. Is there a difference in how you approach crises with clients versus in your personal life or with personal relationships, and how do you kind of mitigate that bias?
I Any difference? Well, first of all, like, usually it's just me, right? Like usually when we're handling a crisis, you know, you want to get everybody's opinion. I don't really get everybody's opinion if I'm, you know, having a issue or a problem, right? I usually try to figure out and think about, okay, what is the best thing to do here? And do like I was a client, weigh the pros and cons, right? So I try to put some of those tools from work in the personal. If, let's see, what would be a good personal one? You know, I'm just trying to think of one. Some things that I've learned, is particularly with children, that I will let some things go. That's all not that serious. So, so here's one that wasn't serious. I thought it was just so awful, but apparently it was not. So, I have two sons, and when the show was on, one of my sons came down, right? And so he was in the living room, and he was on the phone, and he was talking to a girl. You know, you could tell, you know, that lower, deep voice, trying to act like you're older than what you are. And, you know, and he said, yeah, I'm just home, you know, for a family dinner. I'm thinking, dude, you don't even live here. This is not some regular family dinner. What do you? I'm just, you know, I'm processing, I'm listening. And so he said, yeah, you know, I like to, you know, come down, and, you know, I try to come down on, you know, like Thursdays. And I'm thinking, what is he doing? And so I'm listening to the conversation, you know, I'm making dinner. And he said, you know, we just try to spend some, you know, quality time. Sometimes we watch TV, and, you know, we just spend some time together. You know, I try to, you know, enjoy it with my mom. And you could feel that the girl on the phone was saying, well, you know, what do you come down to watch? And he said, oh, you probably wouldn't have heard of the show. I mean, most people don't even watch it. And I'm like, oh my God. And so he says, well, you know, I come down to watch Scandal. And he said, your mom is the real Olivia Pope. You could hear the young girl like screaming through the phone, right? And I'm like, oh, he is so gonna get it when he gets off the phone. And so, you know, I talked to both of them. It's a funny thing, but I talked to both of them. I said, like, that's so wrong, trying to use that, picking up girls. Like, it's awful, horrible, da, 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 da. And I told my husband, I said, you need to have a conversation with them. Yeah, no, I'll do it right after dinner, because my other son was down. And so, you know, I'm thinking there, you know, in there, he's doing that look, you know, you need to be respectful, da, 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 da. No. What is going on? Yeah, high-fiving. Da, da, da. So anyway, I try to take myself not too seriously in the sort of personal issues, but, you know, I mean, like everybody, right? I mean, there are things, in particular things that you don't anticipate. Last night, I got a call at about 2 or 3 in the morning. A friend of mine had been, you know, rushed to the hospital, and I found another friend who was in the city in LA and sent her to the hospital, and been getting updates. And it's no different than what you guys would all be feeling. Do you know what I mean? You just kind of power through it. That makes sense. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah, we had one in this room? No?
Great. Thank you so much for being here and sharing with us. I really appreciate it. My question is a little bit on the personal brand side. Actually, I can come down a little bit too. I don't want to. You sure? Okay. At least 12 more steps. Okay. So on the personal brand side, I'm curious in your story how you went from your closest friend seeing you jump in and stop a fight, and her realizing that you're good at crisis management, to you ultimately realizing you're good at crisis management, And now, people that don't even know you, CEOs, leaders, know that you're good at crisis management without ever having met you. So in terms of brand recognition, how did you go from you personally realizing you were good at something to the entire country seeing you as the go-to person?
And see, right there freaks me out, that whole thing right there. I mean, look, I would be lying to all of you if I said that I had mapped out this strategy and planned a show, TV show when I was 5, and you know what I mean? I did not. The thing I think that has been consistent about me, this is where, for me, I think this helped. Growing up without a lot, right? I'm not impressed with things, right? So we've worked with, I don't know, maybe 10 hits of states around the world, a lot of the major crises, but it is, for me, sort of still the same. Feel very blessed and very grateful. But I think the thing that has been consistent about me is being here, we still hang out, right? So it is not that I take myself seriously whatsoever. I think that oftentimes when people do that, they lose their way, if that makes sense or not. I mean, blessed for sure, but what I think has gotten me there, very corny things I'm getting ready to say to all of you, is I pay attention to the work, right? I pay attention to the work. Half of the stuff that's out there that's on the internet, people close to me know this. Like, for example, we did this a few years ago, the Sony hacking scandal, right? And so I got a email from a friend of mine who I went to high school with, who was all the way across the world, I don't know, Jerusalem somewhere, do you know what I mean? And emailed me and said, hey, congratulations on the Sony hacking thing. I'm like, what the heck? Where are you when you read this? Right, so, I remember that moment. I'm thinking, oh my God, I didn't even know that it was out, right? And I'm looking at that. I just said, let me just lie down for a second, because it just went around the globe. And so for me, I'm like, does anybody really care that I'm actually doing this thing, right? But I just really try to focus on the work and just try to do the very best job I can. All that other stuff will take care of itself, honestly. And I think it's something to be said. I mean, look, I know that folks are interested in building their personal brand, but when you think about it, it is based on the work and the success that we had. Yesterday, I did an interview, which I don't do that much of, interview with a reporter, and I did it because it's a topic that I'm interested in. It's about redemption, and so when he called me up, he called up and said, look, we want to do this piece. It's not a big, but want to do this piece, and I talked to 10 of my colleagues in the newsroom, and you were the only name that came up. Do you know what I mean? I said, well, thank you for that. Appreciate it. So it's not something I ever take for granted. I always want to try to do the best job that I possibly can, and just see where it goes, basically. Yeah.
As a female in the workplace who will tell it how it is, you're not going to lie to someone. Have you run into clients who find it difficult to hear what you have to say? And if so, how do you deal with those situations?
Yeah, I do actually. People are not, fundamentally, people are not used to that, right? And so, in particular, when I'm speaking to women about this, when I'm trying to convince someone to do something that I think is the right strategy, you will never hear me start off a sentence with, I feel. I don't feel anything. I know what I'm saying, right? And so I usually start off with, this is what you need to do, here's why, and here are the facts to support it, right? Not just, oh, I'm just feeling like this may be the right, no, I got this. This is what you need to be doing here. And so I think that is important. And I also, too, I try to level set it ahead of time so people know exactly what they're getting, right? And I always say that if you are looking for someone, right, that is not going to speak the truth to you, if you're looking for someone who is interested in the easy way out here, not the right way out, you shouldn't hire me. I mean, I say that at the outset so they know exactly, right, who I am, basically. You know, I remember, I'll use the example with the president, how that started was there was conversation, I think, in the White House about trying to do something for low-income folks, people that were in need, right? And so I think a budget director, somebody came up with the idea of, well, okay, everybody that has 401ks, you can take some money out without a penalty, right? And so everybody around the room thought that was a good idea, except for me. I'm thinking, oh God, they are so out of touch here. What the heck, right? And so I remember walking, the president and I were leaving a meeting, we were walking to the residence, and he said, "What you think of that? You think that's a good idea?" I said, "You got to be kidding me." Right? I said, "No, that's not a good idea." I said, "People that don't have money, let's think about what we're talking about. What extra money do people have to put in a 401k? So no, if you're looking to help me, I'm one of those people that is not going to help me." Right? And so it was good because, first of all, it help frame how then people look at things further down the road. But I do honestly think that people would appreciate it. Now, you don't have to be as, you know, like I am. It's just who I am, right? But you can deliver the same message with much more probably tact than I do sometimes. And that would resonate. I honestly think people will respect you. I will tell you this other thing, too, is you guys are starting to go out and look at jobs. I was talking to a CEO about this, and he had interviewed a bunch of candidates, right? It was him and I think human resource person. They did some interviews. And I said, "Hey, did you see anybody you liked?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Why not?" I said, "What, they weren't smart, weren't good, experienced?" He said, "No." He said, "It wasn't that." He said, "I felt that when I was interviewing them, that they were trying to be something they were not, right? Something that they thought that they needed to project to me." And he said, "That's why I didn't pick anybody, because there was nobody who I thought who was actually being themselves. They were just trying to say whatever they practiced for this interview, and that's not what I want." So I would just sort of keep that in mind as you are, you know, sort of moving through life in that space, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Probably have time for one more question, or how are we doing on time? Okay.
All right. Okay, now I'm looking for one like in that second to the last row back there. Kind of, sort of. All right, okay. All right, I'll take that one down there. It's closer, less steps, but okay. Yes.
Yeah, actually, I have two questions. I'm also a journalist. I was a
You're
journalist
journalist?
before coming here. Yes.
Okay.
So one of the questions I always ask
You working
to people,
or you in school?
I was a journalist. I
Oh,
was
you
a
were a
journalist for
journalist.
10
Okay,
years.
second act. Yes, got it.
Yeah. So one of the questions I always ask, like celebrities, successful people, is, what would you do differently if you could turn your time back? Is there any, like, advice you could give differently to people that you have advised? And my second question is, if giving advices to many different people, is there an advice that you gave to everyone? Is there something, a secret in the advices that you gave to people? Thank you.
That could like cost you 50 grand right there.
Yeah.
What advice would I tell myself if I had to go back? Wow. I think the advice that I would say to myself if I had to go back is step into who you are sooner. Right? I think I would say that. Yeah. I mean, I remember, for example, now because I didn't want to scare you guys, but I remember the day that I stopped wearing makeup to work. Right? I'm just like, God, it just takes too much time. I got too much work to do. And, I was working in New York, whatever that, to me, that sort of true self is, you just need to step right into it and just own it. Because generally speaking, it's not going anywhere, right? It's just here. So I have embraced all the things about myself, like good, bad. If somebody, I give you an example. My assistant had called me up. This was, I don't know, like 8 months ago. And I was just driving, right? I was going over a friend's house. And I saw a car, and it was the airbag was up, and you could tell that there was fire starting to kind of ignite around the car. So my assistant asked me, it was Vanika, and I said, Vanika, I got to call you back. I think these people need help. Let me get out of the car. I'll call you back. I think it's a fire coming. I'll call you back. And, she's like, what? So I get out of the car, go over, they were trying to puncture the bag and couldn't. Ran back to my car, looked in the glove where I had a little pocket knife, come back, do the airbag, everybody's safe, help pull them out, get back in the car, and I called Vanika. And she just, what, are you crazy? You could have died out there. I said, Vanika, it's what I do. Do you know what I mean? So I'm always going to help if I can. So I would embrace that fully with all the pluses and minuses to it, right? It's just fundamentally who I am. Okay, now what was your second part of it? What would I...
Is there a common theme?
Oh,
You've
that I
given
tell
so much
clients?
advice over
Yes.
over your career.
Here's a common theme. Tell the truth. That is sounding so basic, and honestly, I'm going to tell you what makes me mad about that was because I got it from my mother. Like, no lie. I remember I would, sneak in. I was supposed to be over Tawana's house around the corner. I was probably around, the guy's house, sitting outside, and, I would come home, and, my mom would say, where you been? I said, oh, I was over with Tawana, and da-da-da-da. You weren't over, Johnny's sitting on his porch. No. And I remember she looked at me one time, and she said, now, you should always tell the truth, because the truth is going to come out. It's either now or later. Oh, my God. I tell that exact same thing to my clients.
Yep.
Because it is, right?
Yep.
If you are a corporation and you are hiding the fact that you didn't tell the truth that the brakes were defective, does that come out? Yes? Right? If you are an individual, right, and you, high-profile individual, governor, former Schwarzenegger, right? And you're saying that, what was that situation where he had a kid by, what was
nanny.
it? Yes, exactly right. What was that 7-year secret? But did it come out?
Yeah.
It's just a question of when. So that is consistent advice always.
And I would just add, one of the great legal minds, legal scholars on the planet, Judge Judy, said that if you always tell the truth, you never have to have a good memory.
Now, see? That is very true. Okay, another good word of wisdom from another Judy.
So I think we have just a couple more minutes if there's one final question.
Oh, follow-up? Okay, sorry.
So you run a crisis managed company. If the clients can just tell the truth, why do they have to hire a crisis managed company? They can just tell the truth without going to a public relation company.
Oh, it's
or is that the way you tell the truth?
And why do you want that? I'd be out of business. No, really, it sounds easy, but it's not, right? If you are a company, and I'm using the airbag thing, right? You know the airbags are defective, or you know the brakes are defective. You can't just get up there and say, yo, I should have mentioned this earlier. right? That Toyota all you guys are driving, you take it in because the brakes are defective. People are going to want more. You have to really think about the words that you use, right? We had a legal question. That's liability. Are all the Toyotas defective? I mean, you really do have to think about how you frame a message. There's an art to that, trust me. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is my little selfie.
Okay, so I hope I phrased this correctly, but in today's world of, I guess, crisis management and race relations, how often do you find yourself, or if ever, advising, I guess, these very high net worth individuals or high profile individuals from many different backgrounds? How often does their racial background play into the course of action that you advise them to take? And I'm asking that as like a professional of color who is hopefully about to ascend to a certain level. And I'm asking that, I guess, to color the way that I would view crisis management in the future.
One of the things that I would say, it doesn't, depending on what the situation is, yes, right? Depending on what the issue is, like if the issue has something to do with the race, that sort of thing. But for me, if you're asking, which I think this is part of what you're asking, as an African American woman, and I think with anyone, you have got to, when I was saying embrace who you are, right? I'll give you an example, and you will understand this. So I was at this event, I met a chief marketing officer, right? It's a Fortune 10 company. And the marketing officer says, oh yeah, love to hire you, great, I'm gonna send my team. And I said, okay, good. So I go back to the office. We do all this research on the company. And so we're ready, right? We have checked it out. Say that we found out that they're consultants, that they pay between 60 and 70 grand a month, right? I'm like, okay, great, we got it. We got a little scope in mind. So they come down, and we sit in the office, and then we all go out for this nice lunch, right? It's great, it's going well. We're talking about what we can do, how we can help. Everybody's getting along lovely. And then as we were walking back, the woman was talking to me. She said, yeah, we want to hire you. I said, oh, that's awesome. That's terrific. And I'm like, inside. And she said, yeah, so I was thinking that we could pay you 10 grand a month, and we were going to test you for 3 months. Now, see, right then, I could have lost it then. I could have lost it then, right? And I said, well, I said, that's interesting. I said, what? I said, I learned a long time ago, right, that when I first started my business, I did all of these things, and I said, now that I have a CFO, right, she handles all the things. I said, let me think about it. She'll come back to you on it. And I called up my CFO, and I said, I'm just only calling you up because I want to be truthful, and I said I was going to call her up. And I said, I'm going to let myself just calm down for a few days, because I knew that what she was offering me was not fair. That I knew, and it was wrong. And so I called her back up. It's always good to calm down. Called her back up in the nicest, as my staff says, Judy way possible. And I called up and I said, look, it was great to meet you, and we would be so, great, awesome to work with the firm, but I don't think that you and I are aligned, right? I said, the value that I place on myself and my work is not consistent with what you place on it. So after you had a conversation with the CMO who told you to hire me, give me a call, right? So that was a nice way of saying, I'm throwing this down because you are not treating me fairly, and let me know after you go try to explain this to your boss that you couldn't close that deal. Let's see how all that works for you. In the nicest way, Judy, possible. Magically, within 5 days, I don't know where that 60 grand came from, but it showed up, right? So the only thing I say to you is you step out into the world, you need to understand, and this has helped me, honestly, in my business, go back to your question, you need to clearly define what your values and ethics are, right? I mean, that and where the line is for you. And that, to me, has helped me 100%, 100%. Because that doesn't work for me. It does not work for me. When you look at all the other consultants, right? I have more experience than they do. And all of that, no. I don't care. If I didn't have a dime in my pocket, I wouldn't have taken that money. It's just a matter of principle. So you just want to make sure that those ethics and principles and how you feel about certain things guide you, and don't waver on that. And on that note, you will all be fine if you do that. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Stay on top of the latest in identity, marketing, branding, and pop culture by following Americus Read on social media, or learn more at americusread.com.